Hello there. In this video lecture, we are going to try to learn what is the carbon credits and what are the steps is required to reduce the carbon emissions. So this is the part of the green technology where we are creating the awareness to the human minds. So by taking the one example, the how to convert the iron ore into the pig iron, and further they are using for the conversion of the steel. So in this process, what are the raw materials are required and how much amount of the heat is required and what other ingredients and how much amount of the carbon is emitting, that's we can see here. So there we can see, if you want to produce 1 ton of iron ore, that is the pig iron, so it's required 1.6 tons of iron ore, around 450 kgs of the coke is required for every ton. So in this case, what will happen to conversion of the above raw materials, 1.6 ton of iron ore and 450 kgs. So these cokes we are using. So it's required 13.5 into 10 to the power of 9 joules of heat energy is required for the conversion. For this one, we are using the lot of ingredients for this part. So in this process, what will happen? So 1 ton of pig iron, it generally the estimation is that the 2148 kgs of CO2 emitting into the atmosphere. This may be in terms of the flue gases or maybe as the solid particles which are segregated at the bottom of the furnace. So in this case, it is going to be very clear that if you want to convert the iron ore into the pig iron, so this much amount of the thermal energy is required. In this process, this is the amount of the carbon emission is the compulsory emission. So if you are not able to do this part, so then automatically the iron ore is going to be in that condition. It is not going to be useful for further human level. So in this basis, so I'm going to be talking about what is the carbon credits. What is the carbon credits? As we have seen that, of the carbon emissions, because there is a compulsory carbon emissions are going to be taking place, so that it's required certain kind of the permissions. So in one day they are going to be producing the tons and tons of the pig iron. So in that process, what will happen, that's amount of the carbon emissions are coming. So that's why we are giving the permission to allows a country or organization to produce certain amount of the carbon emissions. So then only the raw material is going to be converted into the finished product. At the same time, if they are not going to be used at the total level of the carbon emissions, they can sell to the other people also, to the country or for the organization. So then here the sale of carbon credits. In this case, suppose 1 ton of the pig iron ore. So if you want to produce the 1 ton of the pig iron, so this is the amount of the carbon emissions are coming. So then what will happen, if you are reducing these carbon emissions by changing the fuels, suppose they are using the coke to reduce the melting temperatures, or the coke they are going the coal they are using for the producing the heat. But if you are using the new methodologies like biogas, suppose you are using as a fuel to generate the heat, then what will happen, the carbon emissions are going to be reduces. It means that 1 ton of the pig iron, there by using the biogas, so here what is the carbon caps? So carbon caps, the basics of cap and trade, a government issues a limited number of annual permits that allow the company to emit a certain amount of the carbon dioxide. So that what we are going to say the carbon credits. So in this case, what is that one? So the government is allowing, suppose there is a Jindal Steel is, Tata Steel is there, and the SAIL is there. So then while they are converting the raw material into the semi-finished and the finished products, there is the amount of the carbon emissions are going to be coming. So for that, the government is giving the permission to that company for the making of the iron or some other product. So the total amount permitted thus becomes the cap. So whatever the permission, suppose 1 metric ton, 2 metric ton, they are giving the permission to the respective company. So that permissions we are going to be say here is the one cap on emissions. Companies are taxed if they produce higher level of emissions than the permits allows. So there is a carbon tax is there. Already we told that there is going to be a tax is going to be taking place when they are going to be emitting more than that part. So another part is going to be that the tax on fossil fuels, especially those used for the motor vehicles, intended to reduce the emissions of the carbon dioxide. Nowadays, the government is taking the road tax. At the same time, these people are going to say there is going to be a carbon tax is that suppose you are using the 1 liter of the petrol, certain amount of the flue gases are going to be you are emitting into the atmosphere. That means greenhouse gases you are emitting. So for that, suppose then we need to pay certain amount. Suppose a person is producing the certain amount of the emissions is regularly. If it is going to be exceeding, suppose he is using, suppose every person you can give the cutoff around the 2 liters of petrol. But if he is using more than that, that means he is introducing the more amount of the carbon emission to the atmosphere. In that case, if he is using the more amount of the fuel, it means it is releasing the more amount of the carbon dioxide. For this one, that person need to pay the taxes. So for this one, the promotional, the carbon credits for reducing the carbon emissions. So reducing the carbon emission by encouraging the people in developed countries to pay them to meet their specific caps. So in this case, what will happen, as we told that there is a carbon sales is there, the carbon tax is there. So then what will happen, to encourage the people in the developed countries to pay them to meet their specific caps. Suppose the industry is need to produce this amount of the goods. Suppose 2 tons of the products they are going to be must be produced. So then what will happen, they are emitting the certain amount of the greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. So that company need to pay to the government, so that the government will going to be making, there is a green sinks they are going to be generating by the green belts in that way. So the theory goes as follows. Since all the people are discouraging discharging to the same atmosphere or stratosphere, it does not matter whether X controls or Y controls its emission, as long as the overall total carbon emission of the world reduces. In this case, by keeping this concept, they are giving the taxes. Suppose the India is going to be emitting certain amount of the flue gases, that means greenhouse gases into the atmospheres because of the steel companies, right? And similarly, China is also developing the certain kind of the products by conversion. In that process, their greenhouse gases are emitting. Suppose in Europe, suppose in Australia or in America. So then what will happen in this case? So by using this one, we need to be specific caps we need to provide to the country as well as to the organization. In continuation of that, so the thinking goes that let the ones which can reduce the emissions cheapest and control their emissions and others which benefit from the foot the bill. So in this case, what will happen? There is the global level, at the universe level, we are going to be say this is the amount of the carbon emission for this year. So then what will happen? Certain countries, they are producing the less amount of the carbon emissions. So because of the lack of facilities and the technology, but some developed countries, they are generating the highest amount of the carbon emissions. So then what will happen? So by making this balance, so that what will happen? So that the total amount of the carbon emission particular year, we can going to be control it. So thus carbon emission control leads to a new kind of trading between the countries. So in this case, what will happen? The developed countries are producing the more amount of the carbon dioxide, suppose the greenhouse gases, but in Africa content, they are producing the less amount of the carbon dioxide. So then what will happen? Those America will going to be pay the carbon credits, that means in terms of they will going to be buy from the Africa those carbon credits to those countries, so that they are going to be balancing is going to be taking place. So just to make this kind of transactions, there may be a different types of companies are going to be coming at the different locations. Maybe each country has its own kind of the marketing strategy. Suppose the London, Chicago, or somewhere they are going to be sitting and they are going to be exchanging the carbon credits from one country to the other country. They are going to be selling this way. So the certified emission reductions. So over 300 Indian beneficiaries have so far developed acceptable methods for reducing the carbon emissions from their factories and operations located in India. So in this case, what will happen? India government as well as from the global level, they have certified that certain 300 Indian companies, they are producing the required amount of the carbon emissions. So they are not going to be beyond that. For that purpose, they are giving the lot of certifications. So others activities in this direction, China, Korea, Brazil, Chile, Mexico and Egypt, they are also getting the certificate for the emissions reduction. So the China is reported to be the next to India. In this activity, 123 successful cases they have reported. India has reported 300, China has reported 123. This is going to be a welcome move from this kind of the developing nations. So within India, the Gujarat rank is the highest one, because in this case, what will happen? Gujarat has completely almost that the coastal line was completely industrialized. They are emitting the lot of carbon, the greenhouse gases. So that the government has given a cap for that. So they are going to be identified different types of the resources, and then they are reducing the carbon emissions. So further is that the Indian people have been quick to grab the incentives given by the UN in the form of the carbon credits for certified emissions reductions and carried out under the clean development mechanism and the Kyoto protocol. So India is going to be able to grab that opportunities by these the carbon credits, whatever the UN has given. And the carbon reduction credit is paid for the beneficiary located in the developed country in the Europe, which benefits from this reduction towards the meeting the target to set his her own country for reducing the carbon emissions. In this case, what will happen? Whatever the carbon credits are developed in India, those people are going to be selling to the other countries, so that the carbon emissions are going to be within the limit. So this speaks well of the Indian entrepreneurs who takes the risk of developing and implementing the carbon reduction process in his or her operation in India, from which she ultimately benefits the yearly basis when a person from developed country pays for it. So already we talked about, suppose you are emitting the less amount of the carbon emissions and you are generating the carbon sinks, so that carbon credits are going to be start to increases, so that those credits we can sell to the developed nations, so that balance is going to be continuing over here. And similarly, UN sponsored agencies in London is designated to certify the emissions reductions and validate the trading under UN clean development mechanisms, which is going to be fine. So in this case, UN is going to be the watchdog role is going to be playing over here. So they have teams to visit the factories, ensure the claims are justified and sustainable before the payment is going to be made. So in this case, what will happen, that UN, so that the responsibility has taken by the UN, they will send the team to verify whether these emissions are going to be less than the given carbon caps or not. If it is going to be less than that, they are going to be pay that money, and they will take that credits to the developed nations. And a new agency called Chicago Climate Exchange has recently come up in the US for similar transaction from the US. So US, that means United States of America, has developed one company, that is Chicago Climate Exchange, so that if any people have the carbon credits are there in USA is ready to take the carbon credits. It is said to have over 400 members and controls over 600 million metric tons of the CO2. So these are the estimated. The similar exchange are coming up elsewhere, including one in India. India also certain times, suppose Jindal has a certain amount of the steel factories are there, it is generating certain amount of the carbon caps. So that means the carbon they can emit it, but they need the more production because of they got the lot of orders. So then what happened in that case, suppose the Tata Steel or Steel has produced the less amount of carbon emissions. So in that case, that Jindal Steel is going to be such in the different companies where they are going to be using the less amount of the carbon credit, so that they can purchase it and they can produce the enough amount of the semi-finished or finished products. So here is the some examples of win-win example for India and elsewhere. So in this case, at present Indian companies are trying to reduce the carbon under the corporate social responsibility, it is called CSR projects, and proudly mentioned in their annual reports. So this is going to be a mandatory for the all industries. Some have happily added in their bottom lines through the introduction of CDM as following. The first one is going to be Aditya Birla, the Garism Industries, which manufactures the cement, aims to reduce the 1% of the carbon dioxide emissions per year. So this is going to be Aditya Birla company. They are producing the cement. So then in this case what will happen, they are using the raw materials to convert into the cement. So then because of that there are a lot of emissions are coming to reduce the 1%. So then what happened, so they are planning to reduce it. In that plan they are also executed, and through this process it has earned 17 crores so far by selling the carbon credits in Europe, because they saved 1% of the reduction. On that process they got the 17 crores of the Europe. And in this case what will happen, the fluoride manufacturing company in Gujarat has made a process change which earns early 1 million per year. So this is also the Gujarat company, the fluoride manufacturing company. So they reduce the carbon emissions, and the carbon credits they transfer to the other nations. By using the low cost solar energy for cooking the meals for schools, temples, trusts, hotels, a company earns the credits besides saving use of the expensive LPG gas for the cooking. In this case also they are using the solar energy. So then automatically the emissions rate is going to be reduces, that whatever the carbon emissions are going to be reduces, and then we will get the enough carbon credits. So the biogas plant are built in boot basis for industry producing waste waters, which can be treated by UASB type disasters. The biogas is used to replace the use of the coal in boilers for producing the steam in the steam factory. As we know that the biogas are going to be coming from the wastage of the different kind of the bioorgans. So then bio products. So then in this case, so they are using the gases as the fuel to convert the water into the steam. And here the waste to energy plants based on industry, municipal solid wasters have come a big source of the power from many industries, thus saving the fossil fuels. So next, Hindustan Unilever has just patented a process for making using the mixer instead of steam. So then in this case what happened, 15,000 carbon credits for the 10 years they got it from the certified companies. So the Delhi Metro and the Indian Railways are installing more efficient electrical coaches and signaling the system so as to reduce the CO2 emissions. The Delhi Metro is estimated to have reduced the equivalent of 51,000 cars on the roads. So this is the one of the metro is going to be helpful to reduce the carbon emissions. So there is an industry group is a similar benefiting for getting. Here is the Solgen company where they are going to be generating the electricity by the wind by the wind. This is called the wind turbines. They are going to be installing at the respective locations, and then they are going to be reducing the carbon emissions. Then they are getting the carbon credits. And almost every house in certain parts of the Turkey has a solar panel on its roof to produce the hot water for bathing, washing. India with more sunshine could benefit in this case. In this case, what will happen? The mostly these Bangalore cities, they are using these solar cells, solar panels there for the heating of the water. And any municipal body can benefit by collecting the gases from its garbage landfill site and using the methane as a fuel. This is also going to be Mumbai, and Navi Mumbai is planning, and they executed for getting the CO2 and the methane for the separation of this one. The State Bank of India is lending the 17 crores to the farmers. It means farmers for setting up a gobar gas plants to reduce their need to burn the fossil fuels. So they expected to be able to help 5 lakhs farmers over the next 3 years and earn 25 million credits in return. So the State Bank also they are giving the loans to improve the gobar gas. So in this case, what will happen? Gobar gas. So there is going to be using the buffalo they are getting. So this is going to be very good for the countryside people. Their project will also give the sanitation to the villages and reduce the deforestation, besides saving the time for the women folk daily looking for the dead things and to light their stoves. So in the instance of emissions reductions are they continually added to the earlier list. And speaking well of Indian talent and Indian efforts to mitigate the carbon emission. A fresh carbon credits worth of 4,000 crores are reported to be due to the India in 2010. So these are going to be, they are adding in their portfolio of the reduction of the carbon emissions or greenhouse gases reductions. So win-win example of the carbon credits for afforestation. So in the Germany industry has shown a farmer's patience by cultivating the large forest and dedicating it for the absorbing the CO2 through the photosynthesis. A single tree can absorb 1 ton of CO2 over a lifetime. The industry paid under the CDM carbon credits in this. So in this case, what will happen? Germany company, they are encouraging the farmers to bring the number of green belts so that the plantation is going to be taking place. So that the further generating the carbon credit system, that means they are going to be generating the more carbon sinks so that they will get the benefit from that part, and the government also supporting. The two similar cases of dedicated forest are reported to be planting trees so that they can harvest the timber and fruit, also the profit selling the carbon credits on the world market. The risk and the cost involved in the development. In this case, these carbon credits, if you want to develop these carbon sinks, it is not easy. So then it is required a lot of capital we need to invest in this process. There are obviously certain risks and cost involved seeking the carbon credits. So the cost is first involved for development of the technology within their industry for reducing the carbon emissions. So that this is going to be, we need to invest a lot of money for the research development for whether this kind of the methodology is going to be reducing the carbon emissions or not, that we need to cross check it. For the number of trials and errors will go in the research and development. And the cost is followed by a cost for verification of the claims by required authorities and consultation fees of the agents. In this case, what will happen? Suppose a company is going to be say that they have the carbon credits, they emitted less amount of the carbon. So then they have the certain carbon credits. Further, for issuing that certificate, that verification, they have to pay the consultation fees and the fees they have to pay. Finally, the technology has to stand the test of sustainability, or it may be refused and cost may go to waste in this case. So if you are not able to prove that methodology is not able to reduce the carbon emission, then whatever the amount you are spent in the research and development, it will go to the waste. So then caps on Indian companies. So Indian government also the very serious after the Paris climate program. The Indian government also giving the certain caps to the companies so that they have to produce within the limitation. If they want to produce the more, then they have to purchase the carbon credits from the different within the country or outside the country. So the carbon emissions globally have increased quite substantially, and the developed countries, especially China and India, have increased it because of their large population. China is the number 1 in the total emissions and India is the number 4. So the caps on Indian emissions would mean 2 things. First, the sellable credits in Indian hands would be somewhat reduced because the carbon companies, the Indian companies would first have to meet their own cap requirements and only sell to the surplus to the credits to the other nations. So thus Indian companies would have less carbon credits to sell, and this may lead to the overall increase in the price of the carbon credits. The second, the global demand of the carbon trading would increases as more Indian companies would also want to buy the available credits in order to meet their own caps. So the price would be increased as the carbon credits available for sale may remain more or less in the same. So the disciplinary measures to reduce the carbon emissions. So they are going to be increasing the carbon taxes in this case. So the disciplinary action is going to be the must. If they are going to be, company is going to be improving the, that means they are producing the more amount of the greenhouse gases. So then how we are going to be making the carbon tax? There are countries visualizing the carbon tax to promote use of the cleaner fuel in their respective countries. So to equalize its effect on goods imported from other countries where the carbon tax does not exist, they wish to leave a tariff and calculated equalize these taxes. In this way, their own country competitiveness is protected. It is feared that such a levies may have a little effect on total emission reductions of country where the imports constitute only a fraction of their national supply. So the New Zealand aims to levy the carbon tax at the rate of US $27.74 per ton of the CO2 emitted. And international airlines flying over Europe are also likely to come under the preventive measures. The airlines landing or taking off from the Europe airports may be soon required to pay the carbon emission taxes based on their aircraft emissions. These measures may not much succeed in reducing the emissions, but rather be another way of adding to the income of the airports. So the outset from this discussion, the first we have understand what is the carbon credits. As we know that if any manufacturing company need to convert the raw material into the final product, there must be a process they are going to be adopting. In the process, then what will happen, certain amount is going to be converted into the useful energy, certain amount of the mass is going to be converted into the wastage, so where they are not going to be using in their company. So then what will happen, in that cases their government is going to be issuing the carbon credits. So that carbon credits are nothing but that company is getting the permission from the government or to emit certain level of the carbon emissions. The next one, the sale of carbon credits. Next we have seen what is the carbon caps. Next, promotional carbon credits for reducing the carbon emission. Certified emission reductions, we are going to be certifying that whether it is going to be within the limit or not. Some win-win example from India elsewhere, win examples of the carbon credits for afforestation and cost involved in the development, the caps on Indian companies. Next, disciplinary measures to reduce the carbon emissions, the carbon tax. Thank you. So in this green technology, we are trying to create awareness to the society and how this this climate change is going to be occurring and how it is going to be affecting. So to make you to understand this one, we are doing the more number of videos. So follow the channel.